Hi guys, and welcome back to another championship video. Going on to round 21, and there's some very big fixtures in here that look very exciting, and a lot of them are very tight to call. Quick recap of round 20. I got nothing right. In fact, I only got 3 of the 12 results right, so that's probably my worst week that I've had. But at least it can't get any worse, hopefully. Let's move on to the predictions. And starting off with an absolute belter is the top two going head to head, Fulham versus Bournemouth. And there's 1 point separating these two. They've both been great all season, but who's going to come out on top? Well, they've both drawn their last 2 games, which Fulham were on a big winning run, so they're still not dropping points, but Bournemouth, they've been a bit shaky recently, not as many wins as you'd expect, and, well, Fulham have overtaken them in the league. It happened a few weeks back, but Bournemouth, they were in a great position, and if they keep dropping points with teams like QPR below, who keep winning at the moment, maybe we could see Bournemouth drop out. Now, this is a difficult game to call, as they're the top two. They're both great teams. But the one thing that separates it for me, I probably should go for a draw, but Fulham's volume of goals scares the hell out of me because they score way too many goals for a side at this level, considering the Championship's normally very competitive. And it is still competitive, but Fulham are just blowing teams away. Obviously, they've drawn the last 2, but they've scored a ridiculous number of goals. And that's what separates these two teams for me. Fulham, having Mitrovic up front, that ability to just be clinical, means I'm going to go for Fulham to win 2-1. Another big game as 2 teams in the top 6 face off against each other. It's Coventry versus West Brom. Now these 2 teams are sitting in 6th and 4th place. Coventry, they've drawn 3 games in a row. Their last one was a 2-2 draw with Bournemouth, and they were 2-0 down in that game and scored in the 85th and the 95th minute to get a point. And one thing that's great about Coventry this season, as long as you're not playing against them, is that they never seem to give up. The amount of late goals that they've scored to either get a point, get all 3 points, it's just crazy. I don't know what's going on there, but they always play right till the end, and it's really falling for them at the moment as they score a lot of late goals to get them points. West Brom, I'm quite disappointed with recently. They've drawn their last 2 games, both 0-0. They haven't scored in their last 3 games, and they only managed to score 2 goals in all of the games in November. So they're really struggling in front of goal. And it's seen them now be overtaken by QPR. So West Brom have now dropped to 4th. And unless they can start scoring goals and winning games, I'm a bit worried that they're going to keep dropping. Obviously, at the start of the season, I went for West Brom in the top 2. I can already say that's not going to happen. With the quality of the teams in the top 2, I don't think West Brom have a chance. But they at least now want to get playoffs. And they're not playing very well. So we'll have to wait and see till the end of the season. But for this game, I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. Barnsley v Huddersfield next. And Barnsley, they got an important point against Peterborough. It was a 0-0 draw. But if they'd have given Peterborough all 3 points, that would have been very concerning for them. They got a draw out of it. Obviously, a win was probably what was needed, but at least they didn't lose it from their perspective. But they haven't won in 4 games. They drew the 1 against Peterborough and they lost the 3 before that. So they're really struggling to pick up anything, as they have been all season. Huddersfield, they've lost 2 in a row and they've started dropping now. Maybe the drop-off that I suggested pretty much within like game week 5 is starting to happen now. But I think they've got enough to win this, as Barnsley are very bad. if Huddersfield don't win this, if they lose it, then I think the drop-off's definitely happening. If they don't win it, they'll be a bit worried because Barnsley, they can't really do anything at the moment. So I'm going to go Huddersfield to win 1-0. The next match involves a team who have made their way into the playoffs, and they've sort of gone under the radar about it, as I didn't notice until I looked at the league table. But they've been in pretty good form recently. It's Blackburn taking on Preston. Now Blackburn, as I said, they've made their way into the playoffs, and they're playing very well. And we've finally got a team, because the 6 I spoke about previously haven't won one of their last 2 games. Well, Blackburn, they have. They've won both of them. So, Blackburn, they're in good form, and they picked up a great win last time out, a 1-0 against Stoke, which is a difficult game, and they won it. So fair play to them. And they're taking on Preston, who are unbeaten in 2. And one of those games was a 1-1 draw against Fulham, which is a very impressive result. And Preston, they're very on and off, but when they're on form, they're pretty decent. For this one, I think Blackburn are in too good form for Preston, so I'm going to go Blackburn to win 2-1. Now on to Blackpool versus Luton, and Blackpool, they lost their last game 1-0 against Blues, and they didn't win any of their 5 games in November. They picked up 3 points out of a possible 15, so they had a pretty bad month after having a very, very good start to the season. They'll want to hope that that sort of form doesn't continue, as they'll obviously want to avoid the drop, and they started really well for it, and I'm hoping they can cling on because I quite like Blackpool being back in the Championship. And they're playing Luton, and Luton, they've lost 3 of their last 4, and the latest was a 2-1 loss to Cardiff. So they haven't been in great form either, and that's why I'm going to go straight down the middle, 1-1. Now on to Bristol City versus Derby. And Bristol City, they lost their last game. It was away against Sheffield United. But they're home in this game, and their home form has been pretty good, as over the last 3 games, they've got 7 points at home. So that's very good from Bristol City. Derby, they've picked up 5 points out of their last 4 games, but that included draws against Millwall and Fulham, which is very impressive, and they beat Bournemouth 3-2. So they've had tough fixtures in there, and the one loss was their last game against QPR, and they lost it right at the end. So Derby, they're in pretty good form considering who they've played. And that's what I'm basing this on. That's why I'm going for Derby to win this 2-1. Cardiff versus Sheffield United next. And these 2 teams, they've both spent pretty much the whole first half of the season in the bottom half of the table. But could they start climbing out around Christmas? Because they're in very good form. Cardiff, they have won 3 of their last 4 games, and all 3 that they won were 2-1 victories. Sheffield United, they've won their last 2, and they haven't conceded a goal in their last 3. So they've really tightened up at the back, defending very well. And that's why I'm going to go for Sheffield United here to keep a clean sheet and win 1-0. The next game is so tight that I think there's only one way it really can go. It's Middlesbrough versus Swansea. Now Wilder, he picked up his first 3 points in a 2-1 victory over Huddersfield, and he'll be very happy to get that first win on the board and hope that more can now come. But Swansea, they, to me, are a good team and they're building. They did have a bad game last week. They lost 3-2 to Reading. Very surprising. And it was weird because every time Swansea scored, Reading scored a minute later. So Swansea just kept getting pegged back straight away and Reading ended up winning the game. I think that was a bit of a blip, and I think these two teams are pretty even at the moment, which is why it could go either way, but I couldn't go for anything other than a 1-1 draw. Now the next game, I probably should go for a 1-1 draw, but I haven't. It's Millwall versus Blues. Now Millwall, they haven't won in 4, but 3 of those games have been 1-1 draws. Probably the most typical Millwall score. Blues, they beat Blackpool 1-0 in their last game, and it ended a run of 3 games without a win. And defenders are starting to come back from injury now, which is great news for us because we were missing a lot of players. Pedersen and Jordan Graham were both back in the last game. And I was quite surprised that Pedersen replaced Harley Dean. I'm glad he did, but I thought he'd bring Pedersen in for Bella and still keep Dean in, which sort of shows what the relationship between Bowyer and Harley Dean is like now. But another defender should be coming back for this one, George Friend, and it's great news as he was brilliant for us before he got injured. I really should go for a draw, and I originally had, and the only reason I haven't got a draw is because I had too many draws, so I thought I'd be positive. Blues to win, 1-0. Now the next game is the only game I've got a 2-goal margin in. It's Forest versus Peterborough. And that 2-goal margin shows that I think a lot of these games are going to be tight. But for this one, Forest, they've drawn their last 3 games. The latest 2 have both been 0-0 draws, but they're unbeaten in 6. So I can't see Peterborough winning it. Peterborough are very poor away. Peterborough's last game was a 0-0 draw with Barnsley, and they haven't won for a while. So this could only really go one way for me. Peterborough only scored 1 goal in the whole of November, so I don't think they're going to get any goals here. Forest to win, 2-0. Reading v Hull next, and Reading surprisingly beat Swansea 3-2 in their last game, and they'll want more of those wins very soon as they're just hanging above the relegation zone. And if one of those teams in there starts winning, they might be in trouble. Hull, they're the informed team at the moment, which I didn't think I'd be saying, but they've won 4 games in a row. And they've only conceded 1 goal in those 4 games. So they're very good at the moment, and I didn't see it coming, but I think it'll continue here because I don't really think much of Reading. Hull to win, 2-1. And the next game is another big one between 3rd and 7th. It's QPR versus Stoke. Now QPR, they're the other informed team in the league for me, just for wins. They've won their last 3 games in a row, and they're playing very good football, which has seen them leapfrog West Brom. Stoke are strange because they've lost their last 2 games in a row. However, they seem to go on little runs. They'll lose a few games, then they'll go and win 3. Then they'll lose some games, and then they'll go and win again. So I think with those little runs in mind, I think I'm going to go for the losing run to continue here for Stoke, but only because QPR are playing very well at the moment. So QPR, I think this is the score I've went for the last 2 games. QPR to win, 1-0. And that's it. So those are my predictions for the 21st round of the Championship. There's some brilliant matches in there, with 3 of the matches involving 2 teams going head to head that are in the top 7. So we could see some big changes at the top in positions, and I'm really looking forward to it. It should be a good weekend of football. Let me know in the comments what you agree with, what you disagree with, and put your predictions down in the comments too. Please like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more Championship content. There's some great games, as I said, and Blues, can we make it 2 in a row? I hope we can. Up the Blues.